Judge Toal denying Alex Murdaugh a retrial. Is that the end of the story? Probably far from it, but certainly a notable chapter in the saga of Alex Murdaugh. Joining me to discuss the impacts of the denial of that retrial possibility, at least from Judge Toal, Shavaun Scott, psychotherapist and author. Shavaun, with the testimony that we saw the other day, including a juror flat out saying, yes, Becky Hill's testimony did affect me, and it affected my decision in finding him guilty, but still no retrial. Were you surprised?
I can't say I was surprised, and I'm not sure why that is, other than I just expected, the court there to not necessarily lean toward, the decision that probably would have been better. I also have to say, and in a way, I'm just relieved we don't have to listen to that horrible trial again with all that awful evidence. That's a personal thing for me. That's my bias. It's
Hmm.
like I just don't want to see us all go through that again. But bottom line, we want to know that things were done right.
Hmm.
And Becky Hill was really a disaster here.
Now, that being said, we want to know that things were done right. Does this show us that things were done right?
Incredibly unprofessional,
Yeah.
and I think that jurors are always influenced by things in the environment and their own prejudices and biases that they're not even consciously aware of. We know that that's true all the time for
Hmm.
people. We may think we're not being influenced by something, but we are being influenced by it beneath our conscious awareness. And it's, I think, rather remarkable that that juror was able to be honest and recognize that they did have, there was an influence there.
Did Judge Toal set a bar that was really unreachable for anybody? One of the stipulations was there had to be intent, essentially, from Becky Hill to try and influence the jurors. Of course, Becky Hill is going to say, I did not
Of
intend to
course.
do that. There's no
Of
way we were going to
course.
hear her turn around and say something like that. Intent, though, doesn't really matter if it has that sort of an effect. That's why I thought this was a really weird thing to say, or a really
Mhm.
weird bar to put on something of, well,
Mhm.
what was her intent? What does it matter? I mean, if you go and drive through a crowd of people because you're on your cell phone, you didn't intend to do it, but you did it. So the effects were there. You don't just
Exactly.
dismiss someone who does something like that because they didn't intend to do it.
Right, exactly. So it was not based upon any kind of psychological insight about how this would influence people and looking at the deeper layers here. So, yeah, it didn't surprise me that the judge did this, but I don't think it was the right decision, unfortunately.
How much of that do we have in our court system where judges, I mean, they're judges, they're not psychologists, they're oftentimes former attorneys and lawyers and all of that. But they don't have the psychological insight that I think many of us would say is the key part to doing the job.
Yeah.
Is that something where maybe I don't know what would change or how to change anything like that, but should that be more of a requirement of the job to have some sort of insight into these areas rather than just kind of, my someone's backwoods southern gut opinion on what they think should be done and how things should be done here in these parts, y'all.
Yeah, yeah, you nailed it, really. I have long been an advocate that judges who are involved, which are thousands, involved in child custody cases need to be educated about more about the psychology of the dynamics of what children need and what works best for children. And there are judges who take it upon themselves to study those things and try to do the right thing. But so many times we have a bias toward, 50-50 custody, and one of the parents is truly unwell, if not dangerous, and the kids are, put in that person's custody half the time. And it's glaring, I think, to clinicians that sometimes this is not safe. It's not in the best interest of the children. And, again, our system doesn't seem to work very efficiently in that regard.
Is there any way to fix that? Because obviously we can't just go get a bunch of judges educated on psychology like that. It'd be lovely if we could. Obviously, we can elect people in, or they can be appointed. If we were to change a system like that, but is there anything that can be done? I don't necessarily think that Jean Toll needs to be punished for her decision here in this specific case, but there isn't a lot of accountability for judges that
Right.
make horrible decisions that affect the lives of many, many people. I would argue sometimes more so than some of the people who come through their own courtrooms that
Yeah.
they're trying to decide cases on.
Yeah. Yeah, I honestly do not know how to fix it. It seems like it's a national problem. It's huge. And our system with these, as we've talked about before, these big systems, laws differ from state to state. And it's just unfortunate that there isn't a path for judges to have a little bit more training in psychology and how these things work.
The juror who did testify very clearly stated that yes, Becky Hill did in fact say these things to me, or at least that's how I interpreted them and took them, and that yes, it did in fact have an effect on my decision. The other 11 did not say that they had that same sort of experience. I guess, how is that? Are we dealing with something here where this could, I guess, realistically happen? Or are we dealing with someone who, it's a false memory, or maybe there's some sort of,
Right.
an impact that's been made after the trial, thinking, oh, maybe she did say that. There's a lot of ways that this could be
Yeah.
generated. I do find it odd that there's just one person who had this experience amongst 12 and seemed to really make an impact, and the others have no recollection of it whatsoever.
Right. I think that's one of the factors probably in the judge's decision is doubting that person's memory or credibility. But there's enough other evidence, particularly the self-published book,
Mhm.
that Becky had an agenda. And that does make you wonder about other things that were done subtly to influence jurors that they may not really remember or be terribly conscious of.
What kind of an impact could this decision have going forward, just on the court system there in South Carolina? Because I mean, essentially, what we saw was yes, you can influence your jury if you're the clerk of court, apparently, and it doesn't really matter. I mean, that's kind of one of the takeaways I think from this. If a judge thinks that, well, the intent wasn't there, I don't know. It seems to have opened the door a little bit of, well, over in this case here, they found that this person did this. It was even admitted to. Um,
Mhm.
I don't know. What kind of impact do you think this could have going forward?
Well, the first thing that comes to my mind is how often does this happen there? And is it just part of the culture? And it's never addressed because most cases are not so high profile.
Hmm.
But it wouldn't surprise me that this is just kind of the way they do it down there. It's very loose.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's just more par for the course of, well, we recognized it, and this is how we do things here
Exactly.
in the South.
Exactly. Hmm.
Hey, it's Tony Brueski. If you like the podcast, be sure to like, subscribe, and press that bell so you don't miss any of our updates on the cases we're following for you right here at the Hidden Killers podcast from True Crime Today. And thanks